I know this is a Wii game, but the definitive edition has just come out, and you think I was going to miss the chance to use this game to promote my retrospective? Plus, you seriously thought I was going to use the Wii textures when these graphics are available? Anyway, let's look back on 2010's Xenoblade Chronicles while actually looking at 2020's Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Following the release of Xenosaga Episode 3, the team at Monolithsoft were in a state of low morale. Their key franchise had just flopped, and they were now left with few projects and a bleak outlook for the future. Worse yet, their relationship with the now merged Bandai Namco had deteriorated, and there was very much the possibility that the company would soon go under. However, hope would come in 2007 after Monolithsoft received a message from Shinji Hatano, an exclusive director at Nintendo. Monolithsoft had previously been acquainted with Nintendo during the development of Baiten Kaitos, a duology of JRPGs for the GameCube. Hanato knew that the team at Monolithsoft were talented developers, and encouraged them to continue making unique, story-driven games. These words of encouragement gave Monolithsoft the motivation to break away from Bandai Namco and join up with Nintendo. Nintendo would buy an 80% share in the company, with Namco retaining 16% and the other 4% being held by CEO Tetsuya Takahashi and other executives. The result of this deal would see Monolithsoft gain more freedom in designing their own games, in return for exclusively releasing those games on Nintendo's platforms. These events greatly lifted the spirits of Monolithsoft's staff, including Takahashi, who began work on a brand new concept for a game. Around the time of Xenosaga Episode 3's release, Takahashi had come up with an idea of a world set on the body of two titans. He would describe the concept to his senior staff, who were interested. One of them, Yasuyuki Hone, was so impressed with the idea that he would create a whole 3D model of the concept. His model would depict the two dead titans with their swords embedded into each other, forming bridges between them. Using these 3D models, Takahashi and others at Monolithsoft were able to determine the location of settlements and other navigable paths across the titans' bodies, and with this, the new game's development was well on its way. In early 2008, Monolithsoft would present the concept to Nintendo, who were quite impressed. Realising that the concept was very ambitious, several Nintendo staff members were brought on, including Genki Gakota, who was experienced with both JRPGs and the Nintendo Wii, which the game would be releasing on. Takahashi really wanted to distance the game from the Xenosaga trilogy by drastically reducing the ratio of cutscenes to gameplay. He would also seek out a new director in the form of Core Kojima, who had previously been a scenario editor for Monolithsoft's previous games. Much like with the previous Xeno games, Takahashi would write the basis for the story. However, helping him this time would not be his wife, Kaori Tanaka, but instead anime writer Yurichiro Takeda, who would help fill out the plot, and Nintendo story planner Yuri Hattori, who would make the story workable for a game. The result of Takeda being an anime writer, Xenoblade Chronicles would end up having a very episodic plot, with multiple points of climax throughout the story. Due to the game style being completely different to any previous Xeno game, Monolithsoft decided not to give the game a Xeno prefix, instead going with the original title of Monado, the Beginning of the World, which was derived from the game's centerpiece sword. This title would be used at the game's first announcement in 2009. However, it would later be changed after Nintendo's late president Satoru Iwata requested that the game should honour Takahashi's earlier works. Thus the Xeno prefix would be brought back, and since the game revolved around a sword, the suffix blade seemed to fit. The game would be released in Japan in 2010 for the Nintendo Wii. The next year, Nintendo of Europe would announce a translation for the PAL region only, in a kind of ironic switcheroo from the previous Xeno games. With the translation being handled by Europe, the English voice cast would almost exclusively come from the British Isles. The result of this was a very British sounding cast, which can be quite jarring to JRPG fans who are more used to American voice actors in their games. With rumours spreading that Nintendo of America had no plans of localising the game stateside, a fan petition known as Operation Rainfall would be born. This operation would see fans attempt to pre-order the game from Amazon, which had a placeholder, as well as get Europeans to purchase the game in droves, demonstrating the game's profitability. This move would be successful in getting Xenoblade localised for the Americas, along with Pandora's Tower and The Last Story, two other Wii JRPGs. And thus, Xenoblade would be released worldwide, now supporting the addition of Chronicles to its titles, and I'm left to wonder, why is it whenever American YouTubers talk about the Xeno series, they love to mention how Xenoblade almost didn't come to the US, but when they talk about Xenogears or Xenosaga, they seem to forget the fact that those games have never been released here in Australia, or in Europe, Pyro Episode 2, Hell, this guy in his video even goes as far as to offer a free copy of the entire Xenosaga trilogy to one of his viewers. Cool. So I guess all his European and Australian viewers have special modded PS2s like me to play the Xenosaga trilogy. At the end of the day, all I ask is that these YouTubers be grateful that the US at least got Xenoblade, because that's a luxury we do not have here with Xenogears or Xenosaga. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. The story starts with the recount of the two titans who were locked in a battle with each other. One was the humanoid Bionis, while the other was the robotic Mechonis. The two would eventually drive their swords into each other at the same time, leaving their lifeless corpses in their final strikes on each other. Over the bodies of these two titans, biological life would develop on the Bionis, while mechanical life would develop on the Mechonis. Eventually, a war would break out between the human-like Homs of Bionis and the mechanical Mechon of Mechonis, and this is where the game starts. Here we see the Homs' forces being pushed back by the Mechon's overwhelming force, and it seems like the battle is all but lost when the hero Dunban arrives, wielding the mysterious blade called the Monado. The Monado makes quick work of the Mechon's first wave, giving the Homs a chance to regroup. Dunban is then joined by his comrades of Dixon and Mumkar. Dixon informs Dunban that they have been ordered to retreat, however Dunban decides to stay and fight to cover the retreating forces. While the trio are successful in defeating the next wave, the Monado's power begins to take its toll on Dunban. Dixon rushes to Dunban's aid, while Mumkar uses the opportunity to abandon the group and flee. Mumkar then runs into more Mechon, where he is presumably killed. Meanwhile, Dunban gathers his last ounce of strength to deliver one final blow against the third and final wave of Mechon, in a strike that unleashes so much energy that its light is visible across the bodies of both titans. The story then jumps a year later, where we meet Shulk, a young scientist who is excavating the remains of Mechon around the Bionis' foot, for components to use in his craft. Shulk then accidentally awakens a crab-like creature when his friend Ryan shows up. The two then defeat the crab, and Ryan then tells Shulk that he should come back to the colony. Shulk agrees and they return back to town. There, Shulk sees the colony's drill sergeant, Vangar, berate his subordinates for crashing a mobile artillery piece into the residential district of town. Shulk then continues to his lab where the Monado rests on a pedestal. There, Shulk runs into Dixon and the two talk about the Monado, while Shulk reminisces about the events of 1 year ago, in which an injured Dunban would pass the Monado onto Shulk after returning from the battle. Dixon then tells Shulk to get some fresh air, which seems kinda odd as he was just getting fresh air only 5 minutes ago. Meanwhile, at the same time we see Dunban, who has lost the use of his right arm due to the Monado. Dunban is being treated by his younger sister Fiora, who serves him lunch. Dunban suggests that Shulk might like some of the lunch too, and tells Fiora that she should give Shulk some. Fiora reluctantly agrees and goes off to find Shulk in a small park outside the colony. The two then share a quiet moment with each other, when see the first hints of feelings between the two. The two then return to the lab, where Ryan is investigating the Monado. When he picks it up, the sword suddenly goes out of control and Ryan starts swinging it around, almost cutting Fiora in half before he drops it. Fiora then gets really angry when Shulk doesn't seem to care about her safety. In return, Shulk explains that the Monado can't hurt Homs, and berates Ryan for being careless. Ryan apologises, and then explains that he was looking for Shulk as Vangar had tasked him to get fuel to power up the mobile artillery that had crashed. The two then make their way to Tefra Cave, where they meet up with Fiora again, who brought with her the cylinders used to carry the fuel, which Ryan had forgotten. Embarrassed, the two let Fiora join them, and together they make their way through the cave until they arrive at an ancient fuel deposit overlooking the colony. There, they collect the fuel when suddenly an alarm starts sounding from the colony, as in the sky above, a large Mechon force flies in, led by a strange-faced Mechon. The Mechon then begin dropping units into the colony. Shocked, the trio then rush back to town. Upon arriving in town, the trio watches the Mechon devour their fellow townspeople. Knowing that the Monado can fight the Mechon off, they attempt to make their way to the lab. As they approach the lab, they see the defense force locked in combat with the Mechon. There, they see Vangaray as he tries to stop his men from running away, but is soon confronted by the faced Mechon, who throws a troop transporter on top of him, crushing him and blocking the entrance to the lab. Realising that they can't get to the Monado, Fiora is tasked to run off with the ether cylinders to get the mobile artillery working so that they can blast their way in. Meanwhile, Shulk and Ryan attempt to hold the Mechon off. The two are on their last legs when Dunban shows up wielding the Monado. After saving the two, Shulk and Ryan explain that Fiora had gone off to get the mobile artillery, and the trio decide to run after her. Despite successfully wiping out the Mechon, the Monado proves too much for Dunban, who drops the sword on the ground in front of another wave of Mechon. Acting on instinct, Shulk grabs the Monado and rushes headfirst into the Mechon. To his surprise, Not only is he able to wield a Monado, but he also unlocks the ability to see into the future. Using this ability, he can now dodge the Mekon's attacks and counter them, wiping them out. Dunban and Ryan are amazed at Shock, however time is of the essence, and the three run off to meet up with Fiora. Since this game's got to be quite new to a lot of people, I will stop there and avoid spoilers. For those who want a full story breakdown, unfortunately Oni Blackmage hasn't covered Xenoblade Chronicles yet, so you'll either need to read this plot summary on the Xenoblade wiki, or just watch the cutscenes which are readily available on YouTube. One does not simply talk about Xenoblade Chronicles without talking about its setting. While Xenosaga had its share of interesting locations, it quite frankly has nothing on the giant open areas of Xenoblade Chronicles. You could probably get away with setting an entire game just in the starting area of Colony 9, and that's just one of several giant open areas this game contains. What makes these environments even more impressive is the sense of scale they give off. In most of the game's areas, you will be able to see where you are on the two Titans' bodies and really get a feeling of where you are in the world as you look far into the distance. And remember that this is being run off a single disc on a console that is barely more powerful than the PS2, which the previous games were on. However, the drawback to these incredible environments comes in the form of the character models. While the character designs are interesting and unique, it's very obvious how poorly they are animated, with obvious 2D textures and blurry facial features. While the definitive edition of the game attempts to fix a lot of these poor model designs, it's still clearly present that the environment took precedence in the design of these games. Xenoblade keeps the 7-man party size from the previous two games, which on a side note I have always found to be the perfect cast size, with 6 feeling too small and 8 feeling too big. Much like with the previous Xeno games, the cast will be bolstered by guest characters who will be playable at select moments in the game. Xenoblade also brings back the character's ability to jump and rotate the camera, which brings back some of Xenogears' platforming elements, although, due to a wacky physics engine, it is somewhat limited. Xenoblade would also see the introduction of additional races to the game. While previous Xeno games had their non-human characters, they were usually limited to mutants and robots, who all had very humanoid appearances. While Xenoblade in some respects continues this with the Hyentia and Machina, it also introduces us to the Nopon, little round furry rabbit creatures. While the previous games have had their furry mascots with Choo Choo in Xenogears and Bunny in Xenosaga, the Nopon have gone on to become quite the iconic characters in the Xenoblade games. On the other hand, one series staple that is shockingly missing from Xenoblade are the mechs. Despite being a series staple, and present in the game, Xenoblade decides to forgo the ability to pilot giant battle machines. As a series that was built around mechs, the removal of such a feature is definitely a point of contention when considering Xenoblade as a true Xeno game. Despite the mechs not being playable, side quests are back from Xenosaga Episode 2. However, the whole Good Samaritan spiel is gone. Now we have a much more generic system of talk to the guy with the exclamation mark above the head for a small task, with rewards for completion. However, a unique expansion on the character profiles of Xenosaga Episode 2 is the Affinity Tree. By completing side quests, you will generate a complex web of character profiles that will show the relation of the different townfolk with each other. Also, by completing side quests, you will develop your reputation, which will unlock additional side quests, as well as the ability to trade for rare items with the townfolk. These features are also taken to the next level in the specific case of Colony 6, where the player will not only help the residents with side quests, but will also help with the reconstruction of the colony. This is done by a series of fetch quests that will take place over the entire game, such that a player can watch as the colony goes from a wasteland to a prosperous settlement. A lot of these side quests will involve finding collectibles, which come in the form of blue orbs scattered across the world. The game gives you the ability to record collected items in the Collectopedia with rewards for finding each specific item in a region. The Collectopedia and side quests will both make use of the environment's day-night and weather cycles, where certain events will only be available in select weather conditions or at select times of day. To help overcome this, Xenoblade now gives the player the ability to quick travel to regional landmarks, adjust the time of day, and save anywhere. Most of the rewards from these quests come in the form of equipable gear and gems. Gear customization is now a lot more expansive than it has been in previous Xeno games, and now affects the appearance of your character's in-game models. Technically, swimsuits and other specialty gear changed your appearance in Xenosaga, but it was exclusive to those items only. Along with gear, you can now equip gems which will bolster your character's stats even more. Gems are not only received as rewards for side quests, but they can also be produced from ether crystals found throughout the game. To produce these gems, one must make use of the ether furnace, in which one must, never mind, let's talk about the battle system. If abandoning mechs wasn't the only series staple that Xenoblade drops, the game also abandons the turn-based battle system from the previous games for a more MMO-style battle system. Much like with the previous Xeno games, 3 characters can be fielded at one time. One will be controlled by the player, while the AI takes control of the other 2. Battles are initiated by selecting an enemy and hitting them with an art, or by pressing the Initiate Battle button. A lot of the enemies will initiate battles with you, however your character will not fight back unless you initiate the battle too. Once the battle is initiated, your characters will periodically attack the selected enemy, as long as they are in range. The character can also use arts from a palette at the bottom of the screen. These come in a variety of forms, from attacks and debuffs to healing and buffs. These arts differ greatly between the cast and go a long way to giving each member a unique playstyle, such as Shock positioning himself around the enemy for high damage, and Ryan drawing the enemy's attention away from the other players. Characters also have a talent art which is charged by regular attacks. The talent art usually comes in the form of a powerful art which lines up with the core of the character's playstyle. The exception to this is Shulk, who instead of her talent art has his Monado abilities. These are similar to regular arts, but are much more powerful and have some unique properties. Much like with the previous game in the series, along with experience the characters will also gain art points, or AP, which are used to strengthen art, and skill points, or SP. Skill points are used from the character's skill tree, in which the character can learn passive skills to improve combat. Each character's skill tree is split into 3, later 5, branches. Skill points will be automatically assigned after battle to whichever skill branch the player has selected. Along with the changes to the battle systems, the battles now take place in the overworld, meaning other enemies can get involved mid-fight. This can become quite problematic, and some extremely powerful high-level monsters roaming the region can randomly decide to join in the fight. However, this usually isn't a frequent problem. Yet. Another interesting feature brought back from Xenogears is the game's lack of an element-based combat system. Instead of trying to exploit your opponent's elemental weaknesses, like in so many other JRPGs, you're instead attempting to make use of arts which play off each other and exploit the game's topple system. Certain attacks will inflict a break status on the opponent. Once in a broken status, the enemy can then be hit by a topple attack which will knock it over and leave it unable to move or attack. The topple status can then be extended in length by daze attacks which will stun the enemy and keep them on the ground. By battling effectively, you will raise the tension of your party members, as well as fill the party gauge. Tension reflects the morale of your characters. When it is high, your characters will perform better in combat. Conversely, if it is low, your characters will perform worse. Tension is raised in a myriad of ways, such as landing critical hits or dodging attacks, and it will be lowered in events such as a party member getting a negative status effect or becoming incapacitated. Tension can sometimes be greatly raised by quick-time button prompts that will appear during battle, in which the characters will motivate each other. This, along with the characters shouting out their arts as they use them, can lead to battles becoming quite the one-liner fest, and a goldmine for memes.
Shulk! Dunban! Why are calendars so rare? I don't know!
Dunban, don't do it!
Because their days are numbered! No way!
One such as Dunban
Dunban!
falls so easily.
Ha!
Now, Starlight Kick!
Ah!
You must suffer more. Shulk!
Starlight Kick! Ah!
Prepare yourself.
How can this
Mind
be?
Blast!
Ah!
The QuickTime button prompts also help fill the party gauge, which is this game's equivalent to the boost system from Xenosaga. The gauge can be filled for a maximum of 3 charges, not only by button prompts but also by using arts in their correct fashion, such as Shock using backslash on the backs of enemies. A single charge of the party gauge can be used to revive an incapacitated party member by walking over to them and pressing the prompt. In the event that you are incapacitated, your AI companions will do this as well, automatically. However, in the event that you are knocked out and there isn't a single charge on the gauge, you will be wiped out and sent back to the last landmark you visited. Using the Monado, the player can see upcoming enemy attacks. The player can then attempt to prevent these attacks in multiple ways, such as toppling the enemy or casting a protective spell over the targeted player. They can also use the party gauge charge to warn the target player and get them to use an art themselves to prevent the attack. If the party gauge maxes out at 3 charges, the party can then engage in a chain attack, in which the fight will stop as all 3 party members will take turns unleashing an art on the target. In the event that the characters use the same colour arts as each other, the attack damage will be multiplied, and this can result in chain attacks dealing massive damage to enemies. Chain attacks can also be extended beyond the initial 3 attacks by chain links, which after the 3rd hit, the party might get a quick time button prompt. By succeeding at this prompt, the party will get another attack. This will repeat for every subsequent attack until either the player fails or the prompt stops appearing. The chance of this prompt appearing is determined by a myriad of factors, including tension. but one of the main factors is party affinity. Throughout the game, by fighting and completing quests, the characters will grow affinity to one another. Along with improving chain attacks, this affinity also allows the characters to use one another's skills, as well as improving their gem crafting abilities. Somehow. Meanwhile, with enough affinity, characters will also be able to unlock special heart-to-heart moments, which will offer deeper insight into their backstories and personalities. Now, seeing as I'm no longer talking about the battle system, I think I should ought to get on to... Much like with Xenosaga Episode 2, multiple composers were brought on to write the music. However, unlike Episode 2, rather than having just 2 composers, Xenoblade Chronicles would have a whole myriad of talent, including Manami Kiyota, Yoko Shimura, and the trio of Ace Plus. Each artist would supply the tracks that fitted with their composition styles, with Kyoto writing the more relaxing themes of Aerith Sea and Satoral Marsh, while Ace Plus would supply the more intense battle themes of Engage the Enemy and the awesome You Will Know Our Names. Meanwhile, Shimamura, who composed the game's early tracks, would also compose the game's title theme. While previous Xeno games had title themes, nothing comes close to Xenoblade's incredible theme song. No Xeno game previously or since has had me just sit on the main menu and listen to the main theme in its entirety. That piano music is some of the most beautiful notes I have ever heard, and I would put it up there with the Halo theme as one of the greatest video game title themes of all time. Yasunori Mitsuda would make his triumphant return to the Xeno series to compose the game's ending song, Beyond the Sky. Takahashi brought Mitsuda on late in development, as he wanted someone experienced with the series' soundscape to write what in Takahashi's mind was the most important song in the game. The final product, while being a great standalone song, does unfortunately sound a bit out of place when compared with the game's other tracks. The English vocals this time would be handled by my fellow countryman Sarah Elaine, who does a great job with what I still think is the best ending song out of the current Xenoblade games. As the game that got me into JRPGs in the first place, it is no secret that I love Xenoblade Chronicles, with it to this day remaining my favourite game in the series. From its amazing world to its thrilling story, Xenoblade Chronicles is the game that really showed me just how mature video games could be, and it did a lot to end my preconceptions of video games as a kid-focused medium. However, upon doing this retrospective, I am left wondering, is Xenoblade Chronicles a true Xeno game? This question is quite important, as a lot of Xenosaga and Xenogears fans do not see Xenoblade as the successor due to its lack of series staples. Not only are the mechs gone, but so is the heavy reliance on philosophical concepts, and from a gameplay perspective, the differences are night and day. While it is true that Xenoblade has very little in common with the previous Xenosaga games, it does actually share some similarities with Xenogears. Not only do both allow the player to rotate the camera and jump, but their stories actually share quite a bit in common. Both start with your hometown being attacked, and both end with you fighting the god of the world to free humanity. Along with this, other parallels can be drawn between certain characters and locations. And I'm not sure if this is controversial, but I think that Xenoblade's story is actually better than both Xenogears and Xenosaga. This is due to the more grounded nature of the story, as I'm spending less time trying to understand what's going on, and more time relating to the characters' struggles. And at the end of the day, Xenoblade's story is not really that dumbed down, as people like to say it is. To me, Xenoblade Chronicles is a near perfect game, with its biggest flaws being superficial in the grand scheme of things. It's no wonder that this was the game to propel the Xeno series into mainstream success. Arguably, this game probably could have gone even further had its release not been hindered by Nintendo of America, which saw the game come out in the later part of the Wii's lifespan when the console was on its last legs. However, the game's original limited sales on the Wii have been countered by 2 additional re-releases on the 3DS and Switch, plus a digital copy of the Wii game being made available on the Wii U. With Xenoblade, Monolithsoft had truly proved themselves to be one of Nintendo's most revered second-party publishers, and it was guaranteed that another entry being made would only be a matter of time. So how do you follow up my favourite game in the series? With my least favourite game in the series, of course! Come back next time as I attempt to analytically look at Xenoblade Chronicles X, or is it Cross? Anyway, I'll see you then.